I'm Duke Nukem, and you're watching Revenant Evil.
Today we're jumping back into Duke 3D's prototype version, known as Lameduke. I've covered the game before here on the channel, once in my first ever video, and then again when I looked at the first chapter of the game, Mr. Caliber. And this should be considered a direct continuation of that series, so make sure you watch those first. This time we'll be looking into the second episode of the game, known as Mission Cockroach. But, being a prototype, expect bugs. Some levels don't even have an end trigger, so please bear that in mind. But that's not to say there's nothing interesting to see. Quite the opposite, in fact. Hello everyone, I'm Evil, and today I'd like to invite you to join me as we take a look at Lameduke's second episode, Mission Cockroach. I hope you enjoy. So the first level kicks off with Duke in what appears to be some sort of teleporter, which would make sense if the prototype story I found online is anything to go by. I've recently made a video about it, but for those who haven't seen it, essentially it says that the story unfolds in space, where Duke needs to switch off a force field surrounding the planet. This might explain why episode 1 takes place on a space station. It then says that Duke would make his way back to Earth, hence him starting chapter 2 in this teleporter. Just over here we find a security monitor that gives us a glimpse of the level ahead. But there's not much else here, so let's move on. Making our way outside, we can see what looks to be some sort of canal. We've got billboards, waterfalls, crates, graffiti, a no parking sign embedded into the ground, and even a cool bridge overhead. Unfortunately, the bridge is inaccessible even if we fly up there with the jetpack. You're unable to dive in the water, but there is an elevator here that takes us up to this area. Maybe this is where you'd find a keycard or something. I did find a hidden lift in this dumpster that took me to the top of a waterfall. I think it would have made a cool secret area. Essentially, the level presents us with two paths we can take. We could either keep going downstream or through this door here. If we carry on this way first, we eventually find a locked door. The switch doesn't work from this side, but by shooting the door, it will open just enough for us to crawl under. From here, you're able to unlock the door. Cool. I've noticed that this happens a lot in Lameduke, where you shoot the doors to open them, so I'm sure it must have been an intended mechanic. Although, I don't think it's one that survived until the final game, as I don't remember ever having to do this in 3D. But before we go this way, let's go back and see what was behind those doors. So this way leads us to a subway. On our way down, we come to this room full of mandroids. Man, these guys freak me out. I found out that these floodlights will come down from the ceiling. Weird. I wonder what their purpose could have been. Anyways, further along here is the subway station. I like the look of the area, but unfortunately the trains aren't working, which is a shame because in the first episode, we do have working trains. I expect they just hadn't set it up yet, but I also like to speculate that maybe there's an in-game lore reason for this too. Who knows? So the tracks loop around, but I did find this secret area that opened up when I ran past it. Inside we have another no parking sign, just in case you attempted to park your car down here. Anyway, this area is giving me a headache, so let's move on. We eventually reach the point of the level where both branching paths would meet. And in here we see a road, though it's leading nowhere. Everywhere you go, it leads to a dead end. And you have to love how it goes up here like a step. This is actually due to this being a very early version of build, and slopes weren't yet a feature of the game engine. The slopes in the final game definitely enabled more natural feeling environments. Moving on, as you can see, this section is littered with enemies. One moment. It's actually one of the very few times bats appear in the game. The final section of the level has Duke going down into the city's sewer system, but there's not a lot down here, so let's move on to the next level. The second level has us continuing on in the sewers, where eventually we come to a junction. From here we could go one of three directions. Going straight ahead is a dead end. Going left leads us up some steps and then down into a room with a monitor. There's a window that we can smash that will loop us back into the sewer. And if we were to go right at the junction, we would find two doors. The door on the right will take us into an elevator that goes down into another empty room. We can break the window here to go further into the level, but for now, let's check out the other path. The door on the left takes us down into this room. There's not much to see here, but I've noticed there's a trigger up here that will cause these lights to show up. I wonder what this was for. Maybe some kind of alarm system. Who knows? Anyway, it also has a door that leads to the next area. So this was probably the intended way to reach this section. This area of the level is a big room with some sort of revolving mechanism in the middle. And 4 large tanks of water in each corner. Inside the tanks are, well, whatever this is. A vertical square wall of water. I have no idea what's meant to be going on in here. We can swim in these tanks though, and 2 of them are connected with underwater tunnels. Wow, this is cool. Is this where they got the idea for the end of level trigger? Pressing it opens the door to reveal the end of the level. In level 3, we start in a room with some exploding canisters. They're a bit lackluster though. Anyway, it appears like we're in another power plant. Looking out the window, we see what looks like to be an empty parking lot. Unfortunately, we're unable to smash this glass, so this view is going to have to do. But this level consists of a similar setup to the last one. One large room with some sort of generator in the middle. From the starting position of the level, we could go either left or right, and they'll both lead to the same room. This is the most interesting room in the level for sure. There's a nuclear reactor here, and we have to destroy it. You'll be warned on screen that the area is radioactive, which isn't a totally scrapped idea. Something similar happens in episode 2 of the final game, in the level Warp Factor. It's pretty cool to see what became of this idea. Once the reactor is destroyed, the radiation warning disappears. There's a corridor just to the right of the starting point that leads down some steps towards what would presumably be the entrance to the building, but in this case, this is the end of the level. Let's move on. Awesome. I love these city-based levels. Let's explore and see what we can find. The texture from the end of the last couple of levels is here on the door, or at least some of it is. So it's probably to indicate that the area houses radioactive material, rather than this being a sign of the end of the level. The street signs here read Vine Boulevard and Hollywood Boulevard, which are reused assets from level 6 in the previous chapter. The first couple of buildings we encounter appear to be some kind of abandoned hotels or apartment blocks. Most doors in here are locked, and the ones that are open mostly just offer access back onto the street. This building here with the balcony area is also accessible. By shooting the wooden door, it will raise just enough for us to crawl through. You guys know the drill by now. Inside, we have an elevator that takes us up to where we can press some switches. Although, I'm not sure if they're doing anything. We can also get to the balcony from here. And there's a manhole that takes us back outside. I like this area here. It's refreshing to see some colour. Hidden behind here is a convenience store with Coca-Cola and Lotto written on the window. There's not much to see inside the store, but just outside we do find a payphone. Let's see how it compares to the ones featured in the final game. The phone box in 3D will play a dial tone when interacted with, but the one in Lameduke is predictably mute. And what's going on with the geometry here? How is anybody supposed to get into this shop? And I like this wall texture that's meant to look like a bunch of cars stacked on top of each other. With a working door, because of course it does. Anyway, moving through here we find an interesting area containing the Capitol Records building, which is a famous landmark in the real-life LA. I like how in Lameduke there were more references to real-life places. It gives the game a completely different feel. It's probably nothing, but I noticed that there are some cracks that run down the street. I couldn't find anything to trigger an event, but if I were to guess, we were probably going to experience earthquakes as a result of Duke destroying that nuclear reactor. Speaking of famous landmarks, here we can also see the stars from the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Cool. These would make their way into E1M1 of the final game, although they do look different. Moving down the street and into this weird brown building is the end of the level. Level 5 seems to take place inside another factory-type setting. There's a long, thin corridor that leads to a small room with a switch. Flipping the switch will turn off the lasers blocking this elevator. Taking the lift up brings us to a bigger room with cool-looking spiral staircases either side. And up ahead we can see another force field. Let's take a look around. So it appears as though this area has 3 floors. The one we start on, one lower, and one higher. Either side we have water tanks. Man, they really liked this idea, didn't they? This is probably the coolest thing I found in this level. Check this out. Awesome. But the level can be completed really quickly. Going through here, there's a switch that unlocks this door, and all we have to do is walk through. We now find ourselves in an underground area, which is presumably the car park of the building featured in the previous level. Here we experience some sort of earthquake, and the level collapses in on itself. It's a pretty cool effect, but basically there are 2 ways to go about this. If we're careful where we stand, we can make our way to the elevator at the other side of the room, which will take us up onto the street. However, if you let the room collapse, another path is revealed. I'd wager that this was probably the intended route. So, let's check it out. This way takes us down into the sewer system. It's pretty hard to see down here, so I'll adjust the brightness. Further along the way, we see an RPG pickup with rockets. Both sprites are completely different to how they are in the final game, and I think this is the first time we've seen them for Duke to pick up. Cool. Just up ahead is a T-junction that we can drop down into. The right side has a collapse, so we can't progress that way. Taking the left path will also eventually lead us to a dead end. So where do we go? Well, by using the jetpack, we can fly up onto the street. Looking around, we can see how tall these buildings are, and how basic the general geometry is here. This is the elevator that we could have taken at the start of the level, but using it now, we see that the collapse has made this area inaccessible. Now, if I recall, this type of storm drain doesn't appear in the final game, which is a shame, as they're pretty cool. Making our way down the street, we gain access to this nice-looking reception area. Moving beyond the front desk, we see a large lobby with a water feature in the middle. Nice. There's several flights of stairs we can take on the right, but it's a dead end. So our only option now is to take one of these elevators. Up here we have a bunch of empty conference rooms. This level reminds me a bit of Hotel Hell. What about you guys? So where do we go next? This is pretty cool, I think. If we jump on this plant, we can reach up into the ventilation system. From here, we can move around above the conference rooms. Unfortunately though, we're stuck here, as this level doesn't have an end trigger. But there are some cool ideas in this level. I like the collapse at the start of the level, and the split path idea. The vent section was pretty cool too. In this level, we drop down into a pool in what appears to be some kind of seaside condo. We can jump over here and explore the cliffs and beach. And while there's not much to report on, I do think it looks awesome. Look at that skybox too. Beautiful. Once inside, we have a cool living room area, complete with a skylight, bookshelves, seating, and a cool poster. Either side of the room are these lifts which lead to this bedroom. Nice TV. Back in the living room, we have some explosive canisters, which will destroy a section of the bookshelf, but there's no real benefit to do so. To progress through the level, we actually have to take a secret path, one that's hidden in the fireplace. Awesome. Here's a mostly empty room, bar for this switch. Pressing it raises the walls, where we're immediately attacked by some captains. Walking down this dark corridor leads us to another junction, with 2 doors either side. Pressing this switch deactivates the lasers and gains us access. Let's go right first. Oh look, it's another reactor, this time with some pistons either side. The left path takes us to a room with a large spiral staircase. But either way, they'll take you to the same room. This room has 4 giant pistons, flashing lights, and a button in the middle. The button opens a hidden door. Let's go check it out. Okay, this is odd. Here we have troopers in small red rooms either side. As soon as they see you, they'll shoot and break open the glass. How did they get in there? Obviously, this is just me speculating, but could this have been where these enemies were being created, or perhaps even tested on? Who knows? Moving through here, we come to some sort of underground cavern with a bridge going across. You can get down into the water, but you can't swim in it. It sure does look cool though. The next area has enemies either side in rooms full of computer servers. So this door, when opened, will open about halfway and then start to close again. Not sure if it's intentional, but you have to jump through at the right time. The next room is a large round area that's in the shape of the radiation symbol, but that will become more clear in a moment. In the middle there's a red light and there's a button. For some reason, this button is tough to press. It's a bit buggy, but to get it to work you have to stand on top. Doing so lowers these sections, revealing a bunch of drones, but also a new switch. Pressing it lowers the other side of the room. It's much easier to see the symbol now. For this next section, the jetpack is required. You can either fly up and press this button, or just skip it and fly through the crack in this wall. Just behind here is the end of the level. And that's the end of episode 2. Well, it's the final playable level. But what if I told you there was a secret level in the files? You see, in the files of the game, we can see that there's actually an 8th level. Turns out it's an early version of the level Overlord from the final game. But this video has gone on long enough. Stick around for a bonus video where I'll be showing off level 8. I'll be pitting Lameduke versus the final Duke 3D head-to-head to see what changed. But that's all we've got time for today. What do you think of episode 2? Which is your favourite level in Lameduke so far? How do you think it compares to episode 1? Let me know in the comments below. Cheers.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to Revenant Evil, or I'll kick your ass.